Sheryl Sandberg has said, true leadership stems from individuality that is honestly and sometimes imperfectly expressed. Leaders should strive for authenticity over perfection. My guest today is someone who embodies this authenticity. With over 25 years of experience in sales, marketing, product planning, and strategy, he is currently in the role of Managing Director South Asia of Kantar World Panel. I've known him for a little over 20 years, and I'm excited to get this spirited conversation to you. So let's get started. Hey, thank you so much for your time and welcome to my channel. I've introduced the professional side of you, which is a fraction of who you really are. So, could you please introduce the other side of you as well?
Hi, I'm Ramakrishnan, but nobody calls me that. Everybody calls me Ramki. I would say that I am a man of too many interests and not enough time to do justice to every one of them. I have a job, full-time job to do. I'm very keen on doing some teaching. I sing and therefore record some bits. Not a great singer, but I do sing. I want to read a lot. I want to watch tons of movies. I want to spend time with my daughter. I want to do some gardening. I mean, I have too many interests. All of them I'm very, very passionate about, but never have enough time for. So I kind of dabble in everything. So I won't even call myself a T kind of personality where I'm interested in everything and an expert in everything because I don't know where my expertise lies. I generally like to bring out the best in people. I mean, whether it's my team or my family or whatever, I try to create an ambience when people can give in their best and support them to do that. So I think that with a little bit of sincerity of purpose and honesty will define me, I guess.
So from TTK, you moved to TVS, then to Lenovo, to Cafe Coffee Day, Future Lifestyle, Fashion, and Kantar. But what caught my attention is the 3-month sabbatical.
Yeah.
Right. So, could you tell us about the sabbatical? What prompted you to take it? Because there's never been a break for you all the while, right?
Yeah.
So, what did you do in those 3 months? I would love to know that.
I wish it is as exciting as you would like to hear, but it hardly is. The fact is, I mean, see, I think different people are comfortable in different cultures and organizations. So one of the moves that I made didn't work out, as in the sense that I was not able to fit into the. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the organization or anything like that. It's just that I just didn't fit in. So when I just didn't fit in, I didn't want to, pull along and try to work there, try to contribute, and then parallelly look for an opening. And that doesn't go well with me because always I've worked somewhere, and if something came my way, and if I found it extremely interesting, then I've moved. I don't believe in staying somewhere unhappy and trying to find something. So therefore, I took that break. And when I took that break, a lot of people told me you're close to touching 50 and how can you do this, you have commitments and things like that, but I just took it. And 2 3 things I did. One is the first 1 month was I just chilled, did nothing, meaning I watched all the movies that I wanted to. I used to go on a Monday morning on a two-wheeler wearing shorts to a theater and watch a movie kind of thing. That's what I did in the first month. Then month and a half later, month later, a little bit of fear started creeping in because there were financial commitments and EMIs and so on and so forth. So I was thinking maybe I should quickly think about what I should do. Fortunately for me, I had some relationships in the PE/VC community because I worked in Cafe Coffee Day. So these people, they were kind of nurturing several projects at one point of time, and so therefore some of them used to call me to guide them on some things. Some of them were paid, some of them were not paid, but nevertheless it was some time passed, so to speak. So I should go and give gyan and support them in some way. I will not name those organizations, but I did with a few of them. But it was not like I would go in the morning and come back in the evening kind of thing. I'll just go for an hour one day, 3 hours another day, like that. So I was doing that. Then I pursued my teaching a little more at that time. All of those things happened, and somewhere in between, the Kantar opportunity came in my way, and that's something that I've never done. I've never been a market researcher, and I've never been on the other side of the table. I've always been somebody who's bought research or bought services. Now I'm supposed to be selling services. So to that extent, I clarified to them that I have no experience in this space and stuff like that, but they were willing to take that risk. And so therefore, I also decided to take that risk and then move. So if you ask me what I did in those 3 months, chilling, definitely. Some amount of mentoring, so to speak, of some new startup stroke brands, and also pursuing this opportunity which came my way, because it was a long process, because when people recruit at a senior level, they take a long time, I guess. So Therefore, I gave myself that time. And of course, I spent a lot of time with family.
So, throughout this time that you've been a leader and leading teams, is there any particular incident or an episode that happened which impacted your outlook towards work or outlook towards your professional life
Hmm.
in any way?
See, there was one of those jobs when it involved me having to let go of somebody, as in, I'm putting it mildly. Basically, I had to get somebody out of the organization. That was an extremely difficult thing for me, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it because I had also recruited that person. So after recruiting the person, to tell the person to move on is something that was just not in me, and I was really, really struggling. And at that point of time, one of my bosses, I went to him and said, "I'm not able to do this. What would you suggest I do?" So he said one thing which has stuck to me since then. He said, "There's nobody who's more loyal than the king. So your loyalty is only to your role and not to any individual. So your role requires somebody to perform at a certain level, and if that is not delivered, so there's nothing beyond that." So that is something which has stuck to me, which is that nobody can be more loyal than the king. So the loyalty is only to the role that we play, and that is something that has stuck to me. Uh, that said, while I use that as a principle and stuff like that, I still struggle to let people go because I take it many times as a personal failure that I have not been able to either identify the right person or provide the right ambience or environment for that person to shine and contribute. So that's something that's a constant struggle in my mind. I have not been able to resolve it till today.
What kind of support do you think you have given to your team members who are struggling with a similar thing? Because I'm sure this is a
Hmm.
common thing, right?
Yeah,
Every
yeah,
leader has to go through.
yeah.
While you're excited in hiring them, you're also
Right.
feeling low about letting them go, like you
Yeah,
said. Since you also mentioned that you are into teaching, how do you really teach someone to just let go of any kind of attachments? Does it make
yeah,
sense?
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it does make sense. If it's specific to the task of kind of getting somebody out of your team, etc. I teach and I upfront tell them that while I am going to tell you all this, I'm not an expert at this because I struggle myself in doing that. But that said, I think it's a major part of the task is in the communication. So that's what I tell them, which is to say, one, to convince yourself that you're actually doing the right thing. You're not doing something which is against ethics or anything like that. You're doing the right thing because you are loyal to a particular role or a definition, and therefore you're doing the right thing. So that's the first conviction. The second thing is to communicate it the right way. So because there is nobody who's really unfit for anything. It is just a fitment between the individual and the role. So therefore that individual's strengths may not necessarily have matched with the strengths required by the role that they were placed in. So that lack of fitment is what is causing the friction. So if that is communicated well enough, then you're actually telling somebody to say you're a great person, uh, but this role and what you have to offer, somehow there's a mismatch, and it's going to be painful if we continue like that. So I'm sure you have something much better ahead in terms of matching your strengths to what those roles require. So that communication, leaving a person completely positive when you're actually telling them to go. I mean, sometimes they say the job of a diplomat is to tell somebody to go to hell and make them look forward to the trip. That's not what I mean. That seems like, conning somebody. That's not what it is. I'm just saying, actually leaving that conversation at the end of which the person feels positive, saying maybe this is a good thing for me, this is a good thing for me, and I have my skills, rather than making them feel small. So that's the only advice that I would give, that at the end of that session the person should not feel small in any which way.
Awareness is the first step to change, is what they
Correct.
say, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
in your leadership journey throughout, like how ego has surfaced for you, has
Hmm.
there been any other learnings that you adapted to,
Hmm.
where there has been an awareness and there has been a change? Any such
Yeah,
incident?
lots. If we are open to learning, there's learning every day. Right? So the big thing is actually I've learned from home, from my wife and daughter, which is to say, if we brief somebody on something to be done, not everybody is going to do it the way we would have done it, right? So from that point of view, if you keep looking at it, that job from that lens, saying why is that particular thing not done, why is that done in this way, do it this way. And if you kind of keep looking at it that way, if you keep looking over the person's shoulders and get it done. Once my daughter asked me, do you want me to do it or do you want to do it? Yeah, so a very simple question, right? I mean, that's a very profound question, nevertheless. Because if I want the person to do it, I should let that person do it rather than guiding them on how to. That's been a big learning from for me, and which is something that I've followed as a principle right through. Saying, if I am going to ask somebody to do a job, the first thing that person would require is space, and I'm going to step back. There are times when I will ask questions, but I'm not going to be poking my nose into that. So that is something that I would pride myself on as something that I practice. And I think that is something that if you ask my colleagues and the others on my style of management, they would say that I stay back and I come when when it's necessary. And at that point of time, all the questions that need to be asked are asked, but there is not going to be any hand holding. There's not going to be any guardrails and guidelines and goalposts and signposts and say go only through them. That doesn't happen.
Is there any trait or skill or a habit that you thought you need to inculcate? Also, since you mentioned style, what is your leadership style?
So, like I said, my skill has been ability to provide an environment where people can give in their best, and that is by staying away. Staying away. That I think is a big skill that I have built over years, where I can stay apart, stay away, and have clarity in terms of what is my expectation, and communicate that clarity, communicate that expectation to the person who's delivering, and then stay away. So that's been a big change, big style that I would definitely have. I think in terms of what I learned, you asked this question saying about one of the big things that ticked or turned in me was about impatience. I mean, in the sense I was a pretty impatient person in the sense that I've never been able to be in the moment at all points of time. Like for example, when I'm conversing with you, I would think about okay, what next meeting is on, but I will still be answering. But I will that works in some cases, but doesn't work in most of the cases, particularly when I'm dealing with human beings. When somebody from the team is coming to have a conversation, if I'm hearing but thinking of something else, that shows on my face. And I think maybe that's a defect in me that I'm not able to mask it well enough, but it shows in my face that I'm not listening. And that makes a huge difference to the outcome of that meeting and the way that individual looks at me or the organization and things like that. So that is something that I've learned over time to say, forget
The
everything
mindfulness.
for the moment.
It's the
Yeah,
mindfulness.
for the moment, listen to what is being spoken and full attention to that person. If you can give the person less time, but whatever less time you give, make sure that time is that person's and not shared with your other thinking.
Other than the example that you gave, just being a leader, how important is mindfulness for them?
Oh, so I think it's super important, but I'm not really qualified to speak on that because I'm not that mindful. There are some areas where I'm able to give that time, but otherwise I'm like for example, I 3 days a week I do yoga. So technically speaking, and I do it with an instructor online. So therefore, the person says lie down, think of something, think of the breath going in, kind of thing. But I'm not thinking that. I know I'm doing the process physically, but I'm thinking something else. So that's not something that I have in me. I want to be, but the reason why I say it is important is because I think that brings focus substantially more than anything else, and focus can solve problems much more than anything else. So that's how mindfulness is not something that I pride myself on, though I want to be.
Your thoughts on how leadership will evolve in the future?
Some substantial, what shall I say, unexplainable changes will happen to the way we define leadership. Uh, I'll give you an example. I'm learning music right now, and I'm learning music from somebody who's half my age, right? Now, this would be not thought of 10 years back even by me, right? If I'm going to learn music, I'll go to some guru for 30 years experience, who's the way and their way of training, etc. But it's got completely flipped, right? Now, all the people that train me, whether it's music or my workout or my yoga, are all younger than me. So that in itself is a switch, right? That's definitely going to happen in the leadership space, where I'm not going to say that average age of leaders is going to come down. That may happen, may not happen, but the way organizations are moving, they're getting very entrepreneurial in nature. So if they're getting entrepreneurial in nature, what's going to happen is one organization might acquire another one, which will have a leader who's probably 20 years younger than you, and if you are going to work in that division, you're going to report to that person. So that age difference is going to not matter. It's going to be younger. So when you're going to start working for somebody who's much younger, the switches are different. The way you have been operating, the way you're thinking, etc. So those adaptations are what is going to make a difference. There's not going to be a fixation in the future on what kind of a person a leader will be. You're going to be able to be completely open about what kind of a leader that you're going to get. The leader that you get might be from the LGBTQ community, might be a 19-year-old, might be somebody whose culture you don't understand, right? All of those are possible. That I think we should learn to separate from person versus role. That is what is going to be the big shift for the future, because it's not going to be linear at all. It's like a what they say, they say the growth is not going to be a line like this. There is growth, but it's not going to be a straight line like this. It's going to be like this, right? So when it goes, it still goes up, but that growth you need to be able to fathom and understand and be prepared for it. So leadership, when I say there's no defined role of a leader, there's no defined form of a leader. Whatever image you had of a leader, you can smash them and be prepared for what leaders are going to be.
The future leaders are in the universities today. And if they are watching you, what kind of a message do you want to give them?
So I think every individual is going to be a leader. Some of them may lead corporations, some of them may lead research teams, some of them may lead families. I mean, every one of them is going to be a leader. So there's no doubt. There's no some are leaders, some are not. Is not going to happen. Everyone is going to be a leader. So to all of them, I would only say my life lessons, which is to say that how much of your presence at a given time, that when others are seeking your time, how much of your time are you able to give them, and what percentage of that is something that you keep watch. Second, I would say is that something that I said earlier, which is to say, if I have a style, if I have a way of working, that may work for me, it may not work for somebody else. So if somebody else has a different style of working, allow that to be. It need not at all be guided by you. So that's the second thing that I would certainly say. And the third thing is that there's learning from everything and everyone, every individual, every situation. There is learning. So therefore, learning need not only come from the C.K. Prahlad's of the world, or the David Arkers of the world. There's learning from everyone. There's learning from an auto driver. There's a learning from everybody. So that if people are open, I think leadership is. It's not you don't become one. It happens to you, right? You don't say I have to become one. There are 5 steps to that. I mean, it just happens to you, and you go along the way. गीत गाता हूँ मैं गीत गाता हूँ मैं गुनगुनाता हूँ मैंने हंसने का वादा किया था कभी इसलिए अब सदा मुस्कुराता हूँ मैं. The spirited conversation continues, and I'm going to bring the part 2 of this conversation next week. Meanwhile, if you have any questions for Ramki or I, do leave it in the comment section below, or you may reach out to me in any of the social media platforms that I'm in. Thank you so very much for watching. I'll see you next week. Until then, stay home, stay safe.